Welcome to Pod to the Rescue, a podcast from Summit Dog Rescue in Boulder, Colorado.
I'm Emily.
And I'm Libby.
We're both professional dog trainers with multiple certifications in dog training and behavior. Together, we have more than 2 decades of experience in dog rescue.
We want to share everything we've learned along the way with other folks involved in dog rescue, sheltering, fostering, and adoption, and anyone who just loves dogs.
Rescuing the dog is just the first step.
We're here to help with everything that comes next. Hello, listeners, and welcome back to Pod to the Rescue. I'm Libby, and today we are bringing you an interview with the incomparable Kathy Sdao. We spoke to Kathy about her SMARTx50 training method and how we here at Summit Dog Rescue apply it with our rescue and foster dogs. This is a method that we have used with pretty much every dog who has walked through our doors since we learned about this SMARTx50 method. And so we really wanted to talk to Kathy about it. But our conversation goes much deeper, and it's about so much more than just this training method. So Emily and I think it's one of the best interviews we've ever done on this podcast. We really hope you enjoy it. Kathy Sdao is an applied animal behaviorist based in Tacoma, Washington. Kathy has owned and managed Bright Spot Dog Training since 1998. She is the author of Plenty and Life is Free, Reflections on Dogs, Training, and Finding Grace. Kathy has traveled across the United States, Canada, and Europe, and to Australia, Israel, Japan, and Mexico, educating students about the science of animal training. She's taught more than 300 seminars, workshops, conference presentations, and webinars, enjoying these opportunities to share her passion for the incredible power of positive reinforcement training, confirmed over decades of working with dozens of species. Kathy Sdao, welcome to Pod to the Rescue.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
We're so glad that you agreed to join us. We want to talk specifically about your technique, SMARTx50. So this has been something we learned about a long time ago, in your book, Plenty and Life is Free. And we have used it with almost every foster dog that comes through our rescue. And we kind of say, if you do one training technique, you need to do SMARTx50. Because it's so accessible for our adopters and our fosters. And it's just a beautiful method for helping our dogs fit into our human world.
You are making my heart sing. There's nothing I like hearing better than my teaching is actually out in the world being helpful. So that's fabulous.
So let's just start out. What does SMARTx50 mean and how does it work?
So SMART is an acronym for the behaviors I most want my human learners to do. So SMART stands for seeing, marking, and reinforcing. So see, mark, and reinforce training, which is the summary of habits I'm wanting to create in the humans I'm consulting with that thereby impacts the behavior of, in most of my consultation cases, the dogs that they're living with. And it was, to me, a way to summarize the science of behavior change in a way that's accessible. Because I think sometimes we get too much into talking about different training philosophies and kind of pitting them against each other in a way that sometimes makes our clients and students and adopters just stuck. They don't know what to do. And in that vacuum, nothing good develops. And so this felt like a actionable way to suggest some great science-based practices to develop habits in the humans.
Oh my gosh. Well, that is interesting to hear that it's about teaching the humans more than the dogs. I think so much in dog training, we think that we are training the dogs, but that you developed it to address the humans really speaks to why this has been so good for our fosters and adopters, because we're teaching them how to see those behaviors and then reward them.
It's interesting. In my long career, I'm old, training animals, there have been jobs I've had where I'm working directly with animals, training dolphins for the United States Navy. I mean, cool jobs where my job is train the dolphin to do particular things. That is a very different job than I've had for the past 25 years, which is to help humans become better teachers for their dogs. And so this has to be a way to invite people to do some training that feels comfortable and actionable to them, that they see quick changes in their dog's behavior, which reinforces what they're doing. So this is my struggle to go, I love training. I'm such a geek. I'm at the end of the bell curve of humans who want to talk about the science of training forever. Most people aren't like that. They'd actually like to have their dogs be more calm or cooperative or safe or happy, or all the goals they have for this new family member they're bringing in. And my job is to help them be successful in that. So this was a way to take all that geeky science and, I don't know, make it palatable for folks.
Okay. That's really a great explanation of that. So for our listeners right now who are like, okay, what are they really talking about? Can you give us an example? Let's say I just picked up a 10-month-old Labrador from transport. It comes
Woohoo!
into my house. Yeah, it's a mix. It's from a shelter. It just is confused and doesn't know what's going on. And someone tells me, use SMARTx50, and they explain it to me. What would you think that would look like? And how would you coach me to use your method?
It's so funny because I don't think you're actually using this example, as the last dog I brought into my own family was a 10-month-old lab mix from rescue. And I was, the word that comes to mind is coerced by a friend of mine to take this dog. That's probably too strong. I was very much nudged to take a dog that didn't appeal to me. I wasn't ready for a dog. Like when Smudge came into my house, I had to remind myself I didn't have instant sort of love for this dog, and to be able to say to myself, what's my main priority with this dog coming from a very different context, found on the end of a tether in someone's backyard in a rural city. I mean, his life changed a lot coming into my house. Actually, I had to remind myself, what are my priorities? To choose a few behaviors that I like, that work for me and my life with my dogs. I get to choose which behaviors I'm going to be seeing. That S in SMART could also stand for scanning or searching. My job is to notice instances of Smudge doing, I'll tell you the big behaviors in my house that I'm going to shoot for. Noticing he's lying on a dog bed. In fact, right now, if you could see, he's lying on a dog bed while I'm talking to you on Zoom, because that's his trained default behavior when Kathy talks to the computer. So I like dogs having a comfortable place to rest. Some trainers call that settling. I just want him lying on one of the 5 dog beds in my house. And he's going to do that just in the course of his day, not because I asked him to, not because I lured him to, just because they're really comfy dog beds set up in a place in the sunshine right now, coming in my front window. I've arranged the environment to make that behavior more likely. It's a behavior I find super functional. So I'm going to notice when that happens. I'm going to see it. I'm going to mark it. For me, who can say I've been a clicker trainer for a very long time. Well before I ever touched a clicker, I was a marine mammal trainer, and for a decade I used a whistle as a marker signal. So there's lots of things that can function as a reliable indicator to your animal learner that they're doing something that's going to get them a reward or a reinforcer, to be more specific. So I might click a clicker. A lot of times, even though I'm a pretty well-known clicker trainer, I don't have a clicker around my house. I'm going to use a word. Yes. Could be good. It could be boop. It could be you whistle with your lips, click with your tongue. You've got a lot of ways to be able to point out to the dog what you're then going to toss them a treat for, or pull out the tug toy, or give them a belly rub, or pay for that behavior you like. Trainers call this whole process capturing, meaning I didn't ask the dog to do anything. I'm noticing what the dog's doing on his own in the course of his day. I've been kind of clever in setting up the environment to skew the likelihood he's going to do some behaviors I like. But I'm pretty quiet the whole time. I'm not issuing commands. I'm not actually even using many food lures to get the behavior. I'm sort of in observer mode, realizing that any behavior I mark and reinforce will happen more often. That's the joy of this whole technique, is it's based on this foundational science of behavior, which is behavior that's reinforced is repeated. Wow, that's great. Let's use that. Let's pick which behaviors are going to get reinforced, because we're going to do that frequently, right? So marking is with a clicker or with a word. With deaf dogs, we can use visual signals like a thumbs up. And each of those marks is followed by a reinforcer, something that that dog values in that moment. Often it's a little piece of food, but we've got other options as well.
So you're not telling the dog what to do every moment of every day. You're just waiting for them to make good choices and then reinforcing.
Yeah, and this is so not only counterintuitive, it's countercultural in the United States. That aren't you supposed to be a leader? That's your whole job, is to be a leader and tell dogs what to do. And I understand that idea, but it weirdly kind of flies in the face of the science that consequences change behavior. And so if we can arrange the consequences, the ways the dog's environment changes after they do a behavior, as opposed to trying to do a lot of verbal commanding before the dog does the behavior and pushing, because we're primates and we like to use our hands, and we're going to push that dog's butt into a sit because it comes so naturally to be a teacher for that dog, to teach them what sit is. It is, I push your butt down. I totally get where that comes from, but it doesn't actually create the happy, independent learner that I want, whose behavior gets better and better based on their own winning over and over, getting their needs met. That is a very different kind of behavior than an animal or human even who is behaving to avoid pressure and punishment. So we can get a dog to lie down in a whole lot of different ways. I want one who's lying down in expectation of only good things happening as a consequence of that behavioral choice. And it means I'm not paying a whole lot of attention to the commanding, which we're going to call cueing. It's got a different term when you're not using compulsion. We're going to not make that be our priority. We're going to care about that. We want to be able to ask our dogs to do things, but I'm not going to start there. We'll get there eventually. It's not my priority.
Oh my gosh, I'm listening to this and I'm thinking, like, I love this technique for any dog, but we talk so much in this podcast about decompression and the trauma that your dog has come through just to be in your living room right now. So for me, if we think about the dog's experience, you've just had everything taken away from you. Now you're in someone's living room. The last thing that's going to make you feel safe and trust for this person is being commanded or told that you're wrong, or, being like having to uphold rules that you don't know what they are. So I know I'm not getting to the point, but it's like, this is the most important thing, what you just said for rescue dogs, that like we're having them happy learners, happy, safe learners.
Exactly that. You just said that brilliantly. And when you said it, it made me like feel in my heart the empathy of being in a situation where you're doing your very best and you're wrong and you're wrong. I have had jobs like that, and they've been a long time ago. And I actually have chills right now thinking of how mentally unwell I was in a situation where I'm doing the best I can, and all the feedback I get is you're wrong. And I think sometimes we inadvertently do that with dogs. I have a new client I just met last week who has a rescue dog from Mexico, brought into a tiny apartment in a very noisy corner in my city, Tacoma, Washington, and is really afraid. The dog is really afraid. And I can see, no kidding, I feel like from the dog's perspective, he's landed on a different planet. And how can we start to resolve that anxiety? Really is grounded in, let's take some of those dogs' reinforcers, even little bits of yummy food, and make them contingent on behaviors he's offering, even if they're small behaviors, even if they're just tiny little bits of bravery, to notice those and say yes and toss a little bit of food. Wow, that is really creating a foundation that can expand into the confident, cooperative, calm dog we imagine. We've got to get there through saying, yes, your behaviors are functional, and I'm going to help you select which behaviors to show me in this new environment you're in.
So I want to go back to this, hypothetical 10, well, maybe not so hypothetical for you, 10-month-old lab mix who's just come into your home. And so far we've talked about this in the context of, definitely good, healthy, functional behaviors like laying down in your dog bed, standing quietly. But when it comes to problem behaviors that we might see, like counter surfing or jumping up to greet guests, is this a technique that can work for addressing those things that we might not want our dogs to do?
It works like a dream if I can get across to my clients and now to your audience this idea, and I often use a metaphor. Let's see if the analogy actually works. I will say most people hire a behaviorist to come into their home. That's what I'm doing, because they want to get rid of a behavior. It is a behavior that's happening that is dangerous or destructive, or they need something to stop. That's why they're inviting me in. And I want to be able to say, I totally get that you have weeds growing in your garden. Oh, they're so annoying, those dandelions. We're not going to use Roundup on the dandelions, though, even though that seems super expedient. The long-term fallout from pesticides. Or, in our analogy, use of punishment. Yeah, it feels really effective in the short run. In the long run, we create some bigger problems. So I'm going to try to avoid that. And so I'm going to help us come up with a plan to get rid of the dandelions by choosing what we're going to plant to crowd them out. So what do you want to plant in your garden? Is it kind of a boring cover crop like, fava beans is not very interesting, and it's not a whole lot of different plants, but you're really watering and nurturing and composting the fava beans as your cover crop. We've got one or two really fluent behaviors that are crowding out the problem behaviors. Or do you want some orchids and roses, and we want some exotic things, and you want a whole variety of behaviors we're going to plant? We're totally going to get those seeds for the behaviors you want planted. But in order to give them time to start to grow enough that they don't get choked off by the dandelion, because that dandelion's already got some roots, we're going to talk about how to arrange your home environment to minimize those behavior problems. And it almost always means some freedom that dog currently has. We're gonna cut back on that for a little bit in an effort to let those new behavior sprouts grow, so that we can take down the baby gates or remove the tethers or whatever we're going to do to expand that dog's freedom again. But I know it's going to be sad that there's going to be some access that's likely going to be cut off, because I'd rather have gates and tethers and crates be doing the behavioral limitations as opposed to you reprimanding doing the limitations. I want the environment to minimize the mistakes, not your saying, leave it, which is really insidious and can create some problems. So I know those things are going to happen, but I don't want that to become your human habit. You're going to get really good at reprimanding. Actually, many of us are already pretty good at reprimanding. I need to plant the behavior in you of reinforcing over and over and over. You weren't taught that, I'm betting. So let's develop your habit by saying, I'd like you to do SMART 50 times a day. 50! That's a lot. Why that many times a day? Because I'd like the human to have that become their default behavior, that they're noticing little bits of good behavior, rather than catching the dog mid counter surf and saying, down, down. That really can fix that problem in the moment of the dog not taking the bagels off the counter. But it's really just making that dog sneaky to make sure you're not looking the next time. And we get really clever counter surfers that know when you're there and when you're not. And then we just go down a road of becoming more devious punishers. And that's not something I want to get behind.
I was just listening to that and thinking about your history training marine mammals. And I was just wondering if you could explain like how your work with marine mammals influenced this philosophy.
Yeah, that's such a great question. I had the blessing of working with different species of marine mammals in different contexts. So the big three were training dolphins at the University of Hawaii's Kewalo Basin Marine Mammal Lab when I was a graduate student. And the most famous project there, this is a long time ago. Most of your listeners weren't born. This was in the 80s. But teaching sign language to dolphins. That was a cool place to get my graduate degree. Got hired by the United States Navy when I graduated to do military work with open ocean dolphins who did mine detection and detonation. That work is no longer classified, so I can talk a little bit about that. But then I got hired at the zoo in Tacoma, Washington, Point Defiance Zoo and Aquarium, and worked there with walruses and beluga whales and harbor porpoises and lots of different marine mammals. And one of the things I carry to my current clients, normal folks who own pet dogs who like a problem solved, I will sometimes say to them, no two dolphin trainers ever had this conversation. Hey, Libby, what do you think? Should we use food today in our training the dolphins or what? It is not a conversation that you have. You're using food as a reinforcer because it's super hard to punish an animal who weighs a ton and can swim away. So it's not that marine mammal trainers are like better people. It's that they know from the beginning to be really good positive reinforcers. It's the tool that they have access to. And lots of exotic animal trainers, that's true for lots of the friends I still have working in zoos and aquariums. And so you're already trained in the power of positive reinforcement to do really giant behavior change in animals. And you're less tempted to go, but with the really hard cases or with the really challenging behaviors. I would like this bottlenose dolphin to carry a packet of explosives in her teeth 600 feet down and attach it to the cable on a mine buried that low. This is insane things to ask a dolphin to do in an ocean where fish are swimming around that they can eat. And that's what you're using as reinforcement. I mean, the whole thing sounds ludicrous. And yet it still worked. It very much convinced me that with the right approach, with the right insights, positive reinforcement really can do the heavy lifting, even in cases where we're looking at serious behavior problems. The bulk of the clients I work with now are dealing with some version of aggression. So that has really just given me a decade-long habit of going, you're really going to have to talk to me about reasons to step outside that positive reinforcement kind of umbrella. Not that it's not something I might consider, but you're really going to have to convince me that we need to do that because I think it has repercussions I'd rather avoid.
I love that you brought up food as a reinforcer because this hang up that so many humans have about using food in their training is so pervasive. And a lot of people balk at the suggestion that we're going to give our dog 50 treats a day. So can you talk a little bit about why to use food and how to do this so that our dogs aren't getting, a tummy full of junk food or gaining weight, which isn't healthy for them either?
This is one of my favorite conversation is actually about the nuts and bolts, the nitty gritty of how to use food in a training program, because I get clients, potential new clients who come to me and say, oh, I tried that food thing. And I want to go, which of the many food things did you try? Because to me, food is a precision tool to use in training so that we can achieve results that are different than, I know so many people, me included, who have accidentally trained an animal to respond to my requests only when I flourish food first, only when there's food in my hand. That is the worst feeling. It really just feels you're powerless. And this is not a comfortable feeling with other humans, let alone with another species you brought into your house. So I want the food to serve that role of trusty reinforcement for an animal who typically is an omnivore who really likes to eat. Now, it's a separate topic and beyond the scope of what we're talking about today. We can talk some other time about the quote, not food motivated dog. This is a big area of my teaching. And in a nutshell, I would say if your dog is healthy, if your veterinarian has done a rule out and said, this is a healthy dog, and your dog is still a finicky eater, I'm going to bet you that you've accidentally trained that finicky eating. And so to be able to recover, what I would say is robust eating or fluent eating. You offer a bowl of food or a treat in your hand, or you toss one on the ground, and the dog has no latency to eat, immediately eats the food you offer joyfully. That to me is a foundation of good training. And when clients say to me, oh, it's okay, we don't need to use food as a reinforcer, he's finicky, I'm going to use praise. It is a really tough thing to be able to describe to folks that the dog mostly, we cannot generalize for every dog on the planet, but the vast majority of dogs that really love praise treat it as a safety signal, meaning they're happy when you praise them because they're not getting punished. This is not true of all dogs. I've certainly met dogs that are turned on by human praise, but I would say they are not the average dog. And I don't want to say that any dog who doesn't treat my praise as real, meaningful payment is a dud. I'm going to say, gosh, it is so easy to toss a piece of food myself or to have a treat dispensing machine toss it. They're so easy for me to engineer throwing that piece of food. I do need to make sure it's healthy food, for sure. We're going to talk about, I sometimes say to new clients, what's your favorite way to deliver a tiny bit of meat to the dog? Are there other ways to have healthy food? Yeah, but it's usually going to be some version of protein. And for my vegan clients, they're like, I'm not touching it. Great. We have ways to deliver food. You do not have to touch it. We've got squeeze tubes. We've got ways to do that. This is a great conversation to go, you can tell me to throw 50 little bits of meat at my dog every day, but that's not happening. Let's talk about how it can happen. And let's talk about how the multi-poo I just met, whose owner's face went, 50? Did I hear you right? 50? I'm like, I know they're going to be really tiny. So the problem for us is going to be, how are you, a 72-year-old woman, going to be able to actually have the dexterity to grab a treat that small? How are we going to deliver something small enough that your multi-poo doesn't gain an ounce with this training program? And it might mean multi-poo's not eating meals for a while, or eating really small meals, or eating meals only the days that you don't have time to do training. How can we free up some of those calories in a healthful way to be made contingent on behaviors you like? And if you can't do 50, hey, I would not want to say to my friend who I'm trying to get to walk with me in the mornings, and I walk a lot. It's early in the morning here in Tacoma, but I've already walked 5 miles because I like it. Would I say to my friend who does not like to walk, come join me for a 5-mile walk? I've tried that. She's like, are you crazy? Can I ask her to walk around the block? Yeah. So can you start with SMART times 10? Sure. We're developing a habit. Start where you can. And if you feel like I've never used food, let's do an experiment. Let's do an experiment. And I sometimes will suggest that the kids in the family, because we want them to be part of the program, are preparing the next day's 25 food reinforcers in a little Ziploc bag or in a Tupperware container, or they're prepping them, they're cutting them, they're breaking up those treats, they're stuffing the squeeze tube full of canned food. Someone is sort of packing the lunch for the next day that you've got those treats ready to go. And maybe they just sit in a bowl in the middle of the kitchen island as long as your dog can't reach them. And everybody in the family is freed up to deliver them when they notice the dog doing something decent. That to me is the least effortful kind of training. The reinforcers are available. You've put them there and you're going to scan for good behavior, say yes, toss a treat, and go back to what you were doing. How we use the food is a big part of having everyone be comfortable with this technique.
Oh gosh, I just love that so much because my life is always chaos and I was a single mom. I always felt like I can't train a dog because I just don't have that time in my day to spend 15 minutes with a training session, but to just grab food and reinforce reward behaviors. That to me was like a game changer for teaching these dogs what I wanted them to do when they were fostering in my house. So that just explained to me when you express that, like why this was like a game changer for me and a game changer probably for a lot of people who have busy lives.
I think we've inherited a paradigm of dog training is in sessions. And it used to be like, a 45-minute session. That's crazy. We wouldn't do that now unless you were attending a class and you were there for that whole class, but that's a long time. But even setting aside 10 minutes to do training, lots of folks can't do that. So can you set aside 10 seconds because you passed that treat bowl on your way to refill your coffee cup? Okay, that's doable. That's great. And I sometimes just suggest people pick 1 or 2 behaviors, just notice those and pay for them and see what happens. I have had success with SMARTx50 with lots of dogs and lots of settings, but I don't know if it's going to work in your house. Pick 2 behaviors, try it. Let's get back in touch in 10 days. And if they do it, sometimes what you'll get is people responding before the 10 days and going, could you make them stop doing this? And one of the behaviors that's really funny to do it for is a bow. So lots of dogs are going to do that sort of stretching where their butt's up in the air and their chest is down on the ground. And we can even sort of predict when that might happen. They're coming out of their crate. You're going to put a harness on. So if you say, hey, when your dog bows, say yes and go find the closest treat. You don't even have to have it on you. Just go get a treat, maybe stash some around the house up on shelves that are non-perishable. You've got easy access. But sometimes people after a week will call or email and go, okay, my dog is bowing all the time now. Can you kind of make it stop? And it makes me laugh because that simple technique has increased the frequency of that trick. But oh my gosh, doesn't that give people the power of, I did that through those, frequent reinforcers that weren't very effortful? Yes, and imagine you could do that same thing with walking by your side on leash, or lying quietly when people come in the house, or recalling out in the field, whatever your behavioral goals are. But it's kind of fun to start with an experiment and go, I don't know, try it.
Positive reinforcement is so powerful, and it's just beautiful when people realize that. Listening to you talk about training the dolphins to do these extraordinary things, that's on another level, but the same techniques work for the everyday behaviors we want to see in our dogs.
100% the same training. It's 100% the same training. I know.
So powerful.
But people often say to me, I get to work with dolphins. They're so smart. And I'm not trying to disparage an entire species. I kind of want to say every species is as smart as they've evolved to be, but that's beside the point. But truly, I've worked with dogs much smarter than some of the dolphins I've worked with. It's not the inherent smartness of the species. It's that they're trained with positive reinforcement. So when you see really precise, enthusiastic, joyful performances at SeaWorld or wherever you've had eyeballs on, wow, that is an amazing repertoire of behaviors those dolphins have. Yeah, it's accessible to you. It really is. It's just going to mean you might be silently nodding your head and closing your mouth when your relatives and neighbors and people on social media are giving you advice on training that maybe runs counter to this, because it's still not the way that we primarily do it. I have hopes. I'm an old person, but I have hopes that it's going to be the primary way we train dogs, but not yet. So stick with it.
Oh.
Listen to podcasts like this where you keep getting information on, hey, we love to embrace science to be able to have evidence-based procedures on what we do in medicine and in all kinds of purviews of our life. And I want to say training is a scientific procedure too. That doesn't mean we have to make it geeky and not fun, but we have to go, some techniques are probably better than others. We totally can help you with that. That's part of the fun of bringing a new dog into your house, is the power you have and the fun you can have together learning. Learning should be fun for all of you.
So to go back to the procedure, I would love for you to just talk about SMART just a little bit more of the marking aspect of like why there's seeing and marking, and then like how you add in the reinforcer so that it doesn't muddy the waters, that you've got this piece of chicken in your hand and you're saying yes with the chicken in your hand.
And it goes to the vast, deep science of marker signals, which is not, this is not an intuitive thing. And so let me use the term clicker. You do not need to use a clicker. I just met new clients that have a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old child. And I said to the parents, as much as the dog's going to benefit from having you click behaviors you like, That clicker is so consistent and salient. It really cuts through the noise of a busy family that the dog recognizes that informative signal. All of that's true. But your 5-year-old and 7-year-old child are going to use it like a torture device for you. They're going to be clicking all the time and you're going to be miserable. So I'm going to use the term clicker, but there's lots of folks who choose an alternate version to inform the animal of what they've done right. And the power of this is what most people want to drop out. They're like, I'm going to notice behavior and then I'm totally going to feed for it. But the problem is a lot of the behaviors that we really value in our dogs are not natural for them. So in no way do they understand that that piece of meat came because they peed on the grass. So let's just imagine that you said, I'm going out with my new dog and I'm going to watch her pee because I really would like to house train the new rescue dog I've got. So I am in the yard here in the Pacific Northwest now in the winter. It's probably cold and dark and wet. So you're going out, you're doing the thing everybody told you to do. You're witnessing your new dog pee. And you think to yourself, wow, that was really great. And you run inside the house and you get a cookie out of the jar and you give her a cookie. It is 100% intuitive to us that we go, she knows that cookie was for peeing on the grass. She's going to presume the cookie was for following you in the house. So I think a lot of times we're doing well-intentioned procedures that is not actually reinforcing, making more likely the behavior we want, which is actually squatting over the grass and urine coming out. I need to be able to pinpoint that. And so if I click just at the end of that pee stream, it means that when I go in the house and get the cookie, because I forgot to put one in my pocket, it's actually going to be connected with that behavior I just marked. It is so freeing for the humans to say, I could wear a treat bag around my waist, but I'm actually not a dog trainer or a marsupial, so I don't want to have a pouch. So I don't want to be around my home office with treats on my waist, but I could put them on the shelf and I could have some treats in each room. Isn't that cool that the marker signal, especially if it's something you can do with your mouth, you've always got available? So you're sitting at the computer and you're looking at your dog across the room lying on the bed and you can say, yes, and go over and get a treat. That marker signal, sometimes referred to as a bridge, means it's bridging the time gap between the behavior the dog is doing that you like, muscle moved in a way that you really appreciate, that standing dog bent his knees and his elbows and lay down on the ground. And you're like, my dog just lay down. That's fantastic. At the instant that they're going toward the ground, you say, yes, go get some food. That is very different than your thinking. Oh, nice job. I should pay for that. And 12 seconds later, that food comes in. It won't make lying down more frequent, even though you think you did everything right. So that marker signal is actually serving a super important function in informing the dog which behavior worked.
I think that's a great explanation. And again, I just love that you've taken these really scientific concepts and distilled them so that our human learners can really grok them easily in their everyday lives.
When I switched from training marine mammals to training dogs, a big challenge for me was to go, gosh, in that very arcane kind of profession, there's a lot of knowledge about how to accomplish really, sort of incredible behavioral goals. That's fantastic. But it's not like an intentional secret. It's just like, wow, if only everybody knew that. And one of my mentors, the most astonishing Karen Pryor, her goal in writing Don't Shoot the Dog, which I just reread for probably the 20th time. It's literally on my nightstand. I just reread it. I still learn stuff the 20th time. This classic book by Karen Pryor. Her goal in writing that was very similar. It was, and I think I can say this, I think Karen would be comfortable. Karen was a marine mammal trainer for many years and a scientist, and she wrote this really interesting, pioneering book in using positive reinforcement with humans and all species, Don't Shoot the Dog. But her motivation was to say, in training marine mammals, we have knowledge that the world could use, because I just saw a parent hit a child in the grocery store, and we can't have a world like this. This world, no shame on that parent, but the parent doesn't know any better. How is that possible that we have a world where parents don't have better strategies than using punishment? It's because that marine mammal training, animal training techniques, the expertise is sort of secret, and it doesn't need to be. So Karen is like, it's not actually that hard. We just have to bring it to the masses, which she did in an astonishing way. I think her work has changed the world. And if it weren't for her, I certainly wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. But I think it really gets to we want to invite people to join this fun training, not sort of finger wag at them that you're doing it wrong. And we're the smug people, which I think I've been guilty of in the past. We're the people that see how much fun this can be, and we want you to join the fun. And we're not so Pollyanna that we don't realize there can be really serious behavior problems with dogs. When you're talking about rescue, this runs the gamut, because I'm not going to guarantee to my clients I can fix every behavior problem. That's just not the case. Can we accomplish great things together using this technique? We can. And we also are going to be very empathetic to folks who are sometimes struggling, bringing a dog into their home who's displaying behaviors they never imagined. So we also want to be sensitive to that. I think sometimes when I get on my soapbox, I'm like, positive reinforcement can do almost anything. And sometimes the wrong dog is in the wrong home, and we have difficult decisions to make. So didn't want to go down a different road, but also don't want to have the veneer of we can fix anything, which seems disingenuous.
Yeah, we see that mismatch a lot in rescue. And yeah, sometimes you do have to help people realize that they're not the right fit, and that's okay. And they can, we can help them. That's why we're here.
Going off on a little bit of a tangent when you were speaking, I was thinking about in 2019, I got to go to Amsterdam, and there's a program there called the Dutch Cell Dog Program. Do you know about that?
I am not going to stand up right now and get you the coat I wore on my walk an hour ago, which is a Dutch Cell Dog coat. I'm
No
not
way. Oh my God.
Bright orange Dutch Cell Dog coat is because I taught for them, and they gave me, I love orange, my favorite coat in the world, and they're fantastic. Love that group. And
love them.
wear their clothes.
Oh my God, I love that. So did you get to go to the prison and see it in action?
Not. I did not actually go to the prison, but I spent a lot of time with those trainers. And when I went to Amsterdam to teach, the Netherlands to teach, this is how naive I was. This is maybe 10 years ago when I first went there. And I knew there was a group called Dutch Cell Dogs, but I had such no information about what they were doing. I thought those dogs were sniffing out cancer, like that kind of cell, right? I'm like, oh, they're doing scent detection on, and they're like, what? No, prisons. I'm like, oh my God.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
Oh, okay.
Oh my God.
What they're doing is even more amazing.
Amazing. So for our listeners, it's a prison dog training program. I actually got to go to the prison because I'm a Karen Pryor Academy graduate. They all have done KPA in the Dutch Cell Dog program, and someone told me about it. And so I reached out and I said, I'm a KPA trainer. I would love to see how you're using this in a prison format. And they were so gracious. I got there at like 7 a.m. in the rain, got in this van with the dogs. So they have the dogs in the shelter and then put them in the van, take them to the prison. And it's a very select group of inmates who get to work with the dogs. And to see these 8 men, it's a male prison, finding the good and reinforcing it and not being allowed to use punishment. It was so touching and moving. I could almost cry talking about it. And these prisoners were so changed and moved. They wanted to tell me how this had changed their lives. So going back to Karen Pryor in the book, and I don't know why I'm choking up, but it was just beautiful. And if we could teach everybody that, and so anyone who brings home a dog learning this can change their lives and how they interact with people, catching the good.
I just had a young, I'm going to call her a colleague. She's 21. She's a college student. Our paths crossed. Anyway, I said I would give her some time yesterday. And what was interesting to me is as she's going to graduate with a biology degree, she's like, well, I might continue the dog training stuff, but I might need to do something more important with my life. And I thought, you know what? Really, the dog training stuff can be pretty important in big ways that changed lives and coercive systems and really stuck places. So those stories of the inmates, that's not a side note, that's everything. And they are one particular example of a population who's probably known not much else than coercion in their life. But I think that's true for a lot of us, right? So I think the ripples that happen from training one dog, parrot, cat, dolphin, whatever, can be ginormous if we can be supportive of folks as they're being brave and trying some new things, right? That means everything to me. And seriously, when we end our interview, I'm going to show you the coat I wore this morning because it's crazy. Because no one in Tacoma knows why I wear a coat orange, bright, hunter orange, that Dutch sell dogs. And I see people like, what does that mean? And I'm like, I love wearing something nobody can figure out. They are amazing. And they are rock stars in their country, by the way. So when I went over and went, we've got some prison training programs in the United States, they said to me, I'm pretty sure it's not the same as ours. And it was not, because wow, they've got quite an amazing program going on and have for a long time.
On a similar kind of note, so many of our rescue dogs that we bring in are shut down. They've lost all sense of control in their own lives. They struggle with frustration, fear, uncertainty. How does SMARTx50 help dogs who are struggling in these ways? By giving them a sense of control? Is that an agency?
That's such a great story. And I'm going to do something I don't normally do, which is take a little breath and just sit for a minute and sort of empathize with what that feels like to be that shut down and to have given up on your behavior. Meaning, so now as humans, we're probably more cognitive, we're doing a little bit more conscious analysis of this, but that feeling of, why bother? Nothing works. I'm just going to sit here in the corner. I don't know, when you said that so eloquently, Libby, I just had a feeling of, I just want to sit with that being for a minute and empathize how uncomfortable that is. And sometimes I'll actually see dogs who are close to behaviorless, meaning they're barely moving, whose families laud that behavior. They're real grateful for that behavior because those dogs can be less problematic. And I want to be able to have rich conversations with folks about what a life of empowerment and animal welfare looks like, and that may not be great. So in your case, Libby, you're saying the family realizes that shut down, trembling, avoidant behavior is not ideal. But I'm going to say in some cases, people don't even realize that's a problem. And I want to go, wow, that is not a normal behavioral repertoire. And coming from a career in zoos and aquariums, we have the conversation a lot with animals who are in zoos. Like, what does a normal behavioral repertoire look like in this environment, which is constrained? So I want to have a similar conversation to go, wow, what can we do to enrich this dog's life in a way that really makes a difference? And I'm going to tell you a specific story. I used to have a consultation office for 15 years on my friend's beautiful 40-acre farm. I no longer have it. I miss it a lot. And in fact, Logan Ridge is the name of where it was. And I have colleagues that got me this plaque when Logan Ridge sold to other owners. Oh my God, the grief. I can't even stand it. But I had a beautiful office in a refurbished horse barn. And people would come to me for their behavior consultations. And so what would often happen is when the new dog would come into the barn and into my office, which is quiet and it's set up beautifully, and I'm going to talk to the clients about the behavior problem, that dog is hiding in my office, under the chair, behind the chair. The dog is in no way comfortable with me or being in a new place. But what I'm going to tend to do while I'm having a conversation with my humans, eyeballs on the humans, I'm going to kind of quietly be marking and reinforcing any movement in the dog. Sometimes the only reinforcement that I have isn't the bit of food in my pocket because the dog's too scared to eat. It is my taking any pressure off, so that I'm a little bit leaning forward. Dog glances up at me. In the instant that they glance, I say yes or nod my head and just lean back. I'm doing the teeniest little bit of shaping of behaviors many people wouldn't see. They're teeny tiny slivers of behavior, but they're the beginning of being able to say to that schnauzer, I'm thinking of a particular dog, guess what? In this new place that you've never been, your behavior is functional. Your behavior is getting your needs met. And in that situation, the need is not, give me food, give me play. We're not there. Give me some freedom from the pressure of you being here. Sometimes I would say to clients, your dog just took a step out from under the chair. I'm going to say yes, and I'm going to leave the room for a couple of seconds. I'm leaving. Is this positive reinforcement? No, it's actually negative reinforcement. I'm going to take the pressure of me away. I'm not intending to be pressuring. That's not a training technique. It's just the reality of that's where I'm going to begin. Having a conversation with this new learner that in this place, your movements create more comfort and ease for you in a very predictable way. Nothing has made humans cry in my office more than watch where that can develop over a short time. Meaning I am building trust in a very specific way, not in a, gosh, we love that phrase. Clients say to me, I'm coming to you to build confidence in my dog. I'm like, I don't actually know what that looks like. Or to build trust. I'm a behavior analyst. What does trust look like? To me, it actually means that animal is moving more and in more different ways in this context over the course of time with me. And I'm actually going to show how that matters. So Libby, when you bring up agency, this idea that our behavior is functional and it gets our needs met, right? That's not anything we talk about to one another. It's something we demonstrate. And that can be the beginning of, gosh, I really want to do that food training with my dog. I watched some YouTube videos. I got a course at Karen Pryor's website, and it looks so much fun to do that puppy training. But the dog I brought home from the shelter, my gosh, I can barely even get him to eat. How am I supposed to do that thing? We still can use good reinforcement strategies, knowing that sometimes we start with, oh my gosh, the only thing that actually pleases you is I'm moving away from you. I don't love that. It's okay. We'll start there. We won't stay there. I am convincing you that I am watching your behaviors and I'm listening to what you're saying. I think sometimes dogs that come into our house have never had that experience. And I think that's where the tears come from, is everybody's having an epiphany. And it's not because I'm a slick trainer. It's because we've actually created an environment where learning can happen a little bit at a time in a pace that really the learner can be successful. That's our goal, that the dog and the humans are successful. That's its own reinforcement.
The power of paying attention in those moments it's just unreal. And I wonder, and I want to know your thoughts on this. I have a little theory. Across the board, when we talk to trainers and behavior consultants and rescuers and shelter workers, there's this sense that in the past few years, maybe 5 years, dogs are struggling more than they ever have. And I just wonder, is it related in some way to our human decreased ability to pay attention and to catch those tiny little slivers of communication that they're sending us? What do you think about that?
I would say 100%. And here's the experiment I kind of want people to do when they say, I could never notice 50 behaviors in a day. I'll say, you know what? I'm just curious. Let's just do a little experiment. Count how many times you pick up your phone in a day. Just count it. It's not a judgment. I just want you to actually be aware, or how many times you swipe your phone. If you actually do that, it's shocking. And I'm old enough to go, I remember a day not too long ago, we didn't have phones. So these habits that are deeply entrained are relatively new, but we are doing repetitive phone behaviors, eyeballs on the phone, swiping 50 times a day, hundreds of times a day. So to be able to say there's not judgment in that, it's that you do have time and the ability to be attentive. You're choosing to do it with something else, which of course is required. I'm not saying get rid of your phone, but to possibly be able to say, hey, my phone's going to take a nap for an hour. And during the time my phone is stationed over there in the drawer and I'm not going to touch it, it frees me up to have my attention on my dog. Or what I will say to myself with my walks with my dog is no eyeballs on my phone during that walk at all. No, at all. Now, I don't have emergency situations. I understand there might be exceptions. Someone needs to contact you. But the deal for me is I'm actually asking my dog to walk with me, which I love and I think he likes too. But there's some challenging situations. Hey, buddy, I've got your back. I'm paying attention to what you're paying attention to. That's my commitment to you. So for this time, I won't tempt myself for that mindless attention that I put on my phone. It's my hands are doing it without my even thinking. So I think there's something about phones being insidious, but I also think that something happened in COVID that changed our habits for a lot of us that still haven't kicked back in place. So COVID was long enough to disrupt habits that we've got. And I want to be able to use that as an example of, oh my gosh, I was, almost 60 when COVID hit, and I lost my ability to have fluent English conversations with people. Like I forgot how to talk. That's how much habits are malleable and they get rusty and they come back. So what a great invitation to say, what habits do you want to create in your lifestyle with this new dog coming into your house? What do you want to do? How can we gamify Smart Times 50 so it's not on your to-do list, it's not another chore? Because if you have one more thing to tick off, your head's going to explode. So to go, no, this is part of the fun part of your day. Could you have a family that, I love this so much. The single mother said to her, I think her son was about 10. They had rescued a new dog, and her gamifying it to her son was, all right, it's your job to count out 50 treats a day. But what I want you to do is put them, and I have this very clear memory that they use Dixie cups. Maybe you don't even know what a Dixie cup is. Google it. But for some reason, she said, I want you to put 10 treats in 5 different Dixie cups and hide them throughout the house. Now, nowhere that the dog's going to be able to get them, but I want to happen upon them and be surprised and then have that be the reminder to me to do a little bit of training with the dog that's going to take maybe 2 minutes. So when I open the drawer in the bathroom to dry my hair, yeah, I've got somewhere that I need to be, but I found a Dixie cup with the treats because Philip put them there. So Philip got more and more devious about where the treats are going to be. To me, that just had the flavor of, oh my God, how fun is that? That it's involving the whole family. It's not onerous. It's not another you should. And where's the reminder? The reminder is the visual running across the thing that prompts you to do the training. Love that ability to say, could you pay attention to what your dog is doing? Yes, right now for the next 3 minutes, I can do that. Can you generally pay less attention to your phone because we're all looking at our phone too much? Oh, now I sound like a nag, and maybe that's not going to be so invitational. Mm-hmm. But I am agreeing with you. I think the cases I'm seeing and the situations I'm trying to resolve are worse than they ever were. And I think it's a perfect storm of a lot of different things coming together. You all would know more than I would. I just happened to go down a rabbit hole of, I'm kind of a true crime fan, which people don't always know about me, but that includes scams. And so I went down a rabbit hole of puppy scam, like how to get a dog scams, which I thought I knew about, but in the last week I'm horrified. So I had no idea how pervasive and deep they are, and that people are getting dogs in ways that is really not set up for their success intentionally. And so even more empathy for folks going, I've got myself into the situation with the best of intentions and I really need some help. So I'm so glad your podcast is there to be able to help folks who really, I think more than ever, are having sometimes really challenging situations.
Yeah. We talked a lot about how Smart Times 50 can help when your dog comes home and you're teaching them how to decompress. One thing when you were speaking made me think was Smart Times 50, just like you kind of forgot how to talk to people well during COVID, like maybe one reason we see so many dogs coming into rescue between like age 1 and 3, and also now we're seeing so many dumped after COVID, is because people do the training, they get the dog, they know, like this is the time that we're training the dog. We have like 3 weeks, then the dog is trained and we can be done. So how could you like incorporate Smart Times 50 into your like 10, 15 years with your dog so that you don't need rescue or you don't need someone in 3 years?
I love this question so much. yesterday. I'm trying not to like have you be in my life, but you're just like, you must be spying on me. I have lovely clients. Oh my goodness. He's 80, she's 77. They got a golden retriever puppy as his retirement gift. He was a pediatrician for 50 years. He's just retired. They've got a golden retriever puppy. They live in a glorious house right on the beach here in the Pacific Northwest. Oh my gosh, their house is glorious. But 80-year-old man is bringing golden retriever puppy on the beach, and of course letting him off the puppy off leash on the beach because she loves me and she'd never run away. So I got to get them. So I only see them once a month. Puppy is now 6 months old. I got them to go on the beach with me yesterday and went, I don't want you to rest on those laurels of she really, really loves you, which of course she does. But Rich, you were a pediatrician for 50 years. I'm pretty sure you saw a lot of adolescents. Did anything change? Not out of malice, just on the world opens up for kids going into puberty. Is that a thing for kids? I don't know. I don't have kids. And he's laughing. He's like, of course. I think we're going to need to teach a recall to the puppy. Like, it's such a funny thing. Like, he's like, no, this is who the 6-month-old puppy is. And I look at the horizon of the beach, which like goes for miles. I'm then thinking, I want you to have a GPS collar and I want to train a recall because there will be tears, right? So we go, wow, how can we say, I love that you're having success with the puppy and you guys are so bonded and she clearly loves you. And let's instill that habit of training, which is not burdensome. I always joke with people and go, hey, did you get a dog and then be super irritated that you had to feed the dog every day? Is that a thing that really irked you? People are like, what? No. Okay, so if you already signed on to feeding the dog every day, I'm just asking you to maybe consider some of that feeding is in a different way. So it's not anything actually different than you're doing. And so if you would say, yes, every day for the life of this dog, I'm going to feed it 1 meal a day, 2 meals a day in Kongs, whatever you decide you're going to feed. I'm just going to add some of that food is contingent on behavior, and it will be a habit as ingrained as you pull out the food bowl and feed breakfast, which, by the way, as you guys know, super inflexible behaviors in a lot of humans. They have a feeding technique. It is particular times, particular bowl. It is a weirdly inflexible kind of thing to go, wow, dogs are really easy eaters. They eat lots of different things at different times, and you don't have to feed the same time every day or the same amount. You've got so much freedom in how and when and where you feed. Let's take advantage of this. And I have people like, no, 6:30 a.m. and 7 p.m. Sometimes it's because of their work schedules, but most of the time it's because that's how we feed dogs in this house. And I go, great, up until now, that's been true. Where's there some wiggle room? In creating this as not a, maybe we don't even call it a training technique. It is part of the way that that dog eats, to be able to say, I want to be able to take my 11,000 steps every day. That's just part of what I want to do, no matter what my day looks like. It's sort of the foundation of my exercise routine. Maybe this is just a foundation of your dog care routine rather than a training technique. Because I think you're right. It's easy to go. We did the training with the puppy and now, whew, thank goodness that's done. And then.
Yeah. I have a big Pyrenees, which I heard you told Marissa, friends don't let friends get Pyrenees. I love that saying, but I love my girl so much, but she struggles walking in our neighborhood because there's so many dogs and dogs behind fences. And if a dog gives her the stink eye, she can be reactive. So my habit is like one huge portion of her food every day is in that treat pouch, and we don't leave the house without it. And I reinforce all those good choices.
Me too. Half of Smudge's breakfast, if not more, is in that treat pouch that comes on a walk. And when clients say to me, when do I get to stop doing that? I say, when do you stop bringing poop bags on a walk? And they laugh and they go, what do you mean? I'm like, don't you carry poop bags for the life of the dog? Aren't they going to poop every day? Well, yeah. Okay, then you can carry the treats in one pocket, the poop bags in the other forever, right? It's not a flaw to go, Smudge just turned 9. And I still carry half his breakfast on our walk.
Yeah. And when we get a foster in, even though they might not be leash reactive, we feed them on the walks to make sure we don't get in a situation where, we're not, it's not guaranteed, but to prevent as much as we can that they will become leash reactive, because That's like one of the number one things we see is leash reactivity.
Big time. And if you've never had a leash reactive dog, and I know people who haven't, they're so like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that Smudge sometimes lunges and barks. I'm like, wait, just wait, right? You do not know until you sort of live with one. Wow, that's a lot. So if we can prevent it, that's huge.
So we've talked a lot so far about rescue dogs in the context of a foster home or an adoptive home. But we do have a lot of listeners who run shelters and work in shelters. And I would just love to touch on how this technique can be adapted to a shelter environment where maybe the dog isn't, different workers are coming and going. They don't necessarily see the same people every day. How can shelters use this technique?
Bless your heart for the shout out to all the shelter workers. And I am no expert in shelter behavior, but my colleagues that do that work, oh, I'm just so grateful. It's so essential and challenging, right? So just thank you to all our shelter workers. And because I'm not an expert in that environment, I'm going to answer your question in a way that's using sort of a family with a lot of different members who are interacting with the dog. And what would Smart Times 50 look like with several different people interacting with that dog? And for me, it's going to center on, could we have a conversation? And sometimes I have this conversation with the family on the first time I visit, of 3 very specific movements that you all agree you'd like to see more of. Just let's get on the same page of anything the dog can do behaviorally. How can they move that you would say, yeah, that's generally a great idea. So picking out 2 or 3 universally desirable behaviors to be able to, and it may not be the same for each dog, to be able to have that somehow clearly in signage on that kennel run, and to be able to have treats available on the door of that kennel. So as those busy workers are walking by, they're literally scanning the dog for, did the dog's head turn up and look at the eyes of the human walking by? That's not a behavior I would choose. It's not my favorite, but it's a behavior that a lot of folks want to train a shelter dog or any dog for. So if that's true, if for Sadie, the shelter dog, that's one of the top 2 or 3 behaviors, shelter worker walking by can notice that, say yes, piece of kibble, throws into the kennel run and keeps going on. If it is, wiggles up to the front of the kennel run in a curious way, fantastic. That often presents really well to adopters. We kind of like wiggliness. Everyone's going to have to make sure they agree on what it looks like to sort of wiggle on up rather than, straight shooting aggressive up to the kennel run. We're going to have some consistency about what behaviors we're scanning for as we walk by. But this is a technique that we did, let's say at the beluga whale pool at Point Defiant Zoo. A lot of times we'd be walking past the beluga whale pool as the trainers. We're not actually doing a training session. We just happen to see the belugas doing something kind of interesting, spitting a little water at a guest. Belugas like to spit water. And we're like, oh my gosh, Shiku is spitting at that little kid. I'm going to toot my whistle and run back and get a herring and give it to Shiku. I'm just knowing things I'd love to see you doing as I'm going from A to B. I noticed it. I'm paying for it. That to me feels like it's not, oh my God, we're asking them to do another training plan when their days are already too short and it's a chaotic environment. For a lot of shelters, shouldn't say a lot of shelters. After Karen Pryor wrote a protocol for using capturing to create more quiet in shelters, I have talked to shelter workers who've said to me, just having quiet be a behavior we pay for has worked. For me, that's a little uncomfortable because quiet isn't a behavior, it's the absence of a behavior, but we'll stretch it to be able to go, dogs' mouths are shut. Okay, we're paying for that. That you'd have eyeballs to be able to have the repetitions of paying for particular behaviors, I think is something that might be doable in shelters. And it ends up being reinforcers are easily available. There's 2 or 3 behaviors we're scanning for, and all the various people dealing with that dog are consistent in what they are. I often have families start exactly that same way.
That's a super useful way to frame it. And I think that could be really powerful to have even more sets of eyeballs scanning for these behaviors that we want our dogs to repeat. All right. So before we let you go, if we could just take one take-home lesson for our listeners about SMARTx50, what would you want people to really understand from this conversation?
There would be a foundational law of learning that talks to us about repetitions. And so we've done some sort of physical conditioning where we sort of take for granted that we're not going to get guns in our biceps unless we sort of do some repetitions of curls, and we go, well, of course, I'm not going to do like one heavy lift. We're going to do relatively easy repetitions, and that builds the muscle. That idea of repetitions is really foundational for learning. Not super challenging, successful repetitions creates a really solid foundation. That's where the times 50 comes from, to be able to work in some repetitions in a way that's not too painful for folks. So that would be one. Maybe the more challenging from a sort of philosophical perspective is this procedure really challenges us primates, us humans, to step away from the things that are our most fluent habits, which are talking and touching, to be able to get animals to move. So it doesn't mean we aren't going to eventually have cues that we can use our voices to request our dogs to come. It just means we're not leaning on that as the best educational tool. So you're going to feel, I think, if you try the experiment, weirdly passive. But I'm going to tell you, you're not. You're using the other thing your brain is fantastic at, and that's observing. So to be able to silence your talking, keep your hands still, other than for tossing treats, just don't be pushing the dog around, I guess is what I'm meaning. You're really going to free yourself up to be able to be this observer of behavior, which is really phenomenal. Watching animals behave is this gift that I just want to give to everybody, to go, oh my gosh, you're going to start to, like, I was walking on the waterfront in Tacoma this morning, and I was almost late for our appointment because I got fascinated by watching gulls attacking an eagle. And I'm just like, oh, this is the most interesting behavior that these wild birds are doing. I watched for 10 minutes because behavior is this evolved gift that species of all kinds have. So when you go, I'm just going to take a little time to be quiet and keep my hands still and watch what this dog is doing. I don't know. It's the way into a really interesting and infinitely fascinating world of this new family member you've brought in. So I guess it's that piece of it that invites you to stop being the commander in chief, which everybody will tell you you need to be, and just be a good feeder, be a good observer and a good feeder of behaviors you want, and you're going to be surprised.
What a beautiful place to leave it. Okay, Kathy, and where can our listeners find you online to find out more about your work and your consulting?
That's a great question. My website is my name, Kathy Sdao. Sdao is spelled weirdly. It's Sdao. And it's Southern Italian, people ask, and it's Italian. So kathysdao.com, and you'll find basic information about my services, which include doing Zoom consultations. So I think sometimes when we talk about this stuff, folks wonder how it might apply to their specific situation. And I do behavior consultations by Zoom, so you can find out more information there. And also my books and recordings, and I'll put this podcast on my website so other people can find it as well. So kathysdao.com.
Thanks so much, Kathy.
Yeah, thank you for coming and talking with us today. We really appreciate it.
Sincere pleasure. Thank you for all the work you're doing.
Thanks for tuning in. If you liked this episode, don't forget to rate and review. It helps other folks like you find the show. Thanks to Mike Pesci for the original music and James Eade of Be Heard for production. For show notes and transcripts, visit podtotherescue.com. Let us know what you think about this episode on social media. We're at Pod to the Rescue on Facebook and Instagram, and we love connecting with listeners. We'll catch you next time on Pod to the Rescue. Oh, and tell your dog we said hi.